to start with the clock. We want to remind our guests in the audience that if you want to comment on any portion of today's discussion, to please fill out a speaker slip, which are available from our staff, both on the table outside as well as over here next to the window. We do have one comment card. Is Craig Scott with the Automobile Club of Southern California present? Or is he still coming back from lunch?
Probably coming back from lunch.
He was here earlier.
Great. We will hold off and let Mr. Scott speak once he has returned. Are there any other closing comments, either from our presenters or either of our two commissions or staff, on road user charge before we move into our after-lunch conversations on tolling and pricing? Seeing none, let's then start that conversation with at least four speakers. We're going to start with Noah Crocker with the Washington State Transportation Commission. Noah? Is Noah back yet from lunch?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm over here.
Good job, Noah.
I was wondering that myself, but no worries.
There you go. Noah, welcome.
Do you want to do a roll call again?
Our executive director is suggesting we may want to do a roll call again. If we could have someone call the roll.
Commissioner Jennings? Present. Commissioner Litt? Present. Commissioner O'Neill? Aye. Commissioner Reisland? Commissioner Hoyer? Here. Commissioner Tortelli? Here. Chair Haley?
Present.
Commissioner Alvarado?
Yes.
Commissioner Singh? Commissioner Burke?
Here.
Commissioner Dunn?
Here.
Commissioner Marks?
Here.
Commissioner Fromer? Commissioner Gilnetti? Commissioner Inman?
Here.
Commissioner Madaffer?
Here.
Commissioner Cavalloni? Chair Rodino?
Present. Thank you. Noah, welcome to Silicon Valley.
Great. Thank you, Commissioners, for allowing me to speak today. My name is Noah Crocker. I'm the Financial Analyst for the Washington State Transportation Commission. I'm hoping to keep my comments on Washington State's tolling succinct and efficient so we can get back on schedule today. So I'll start off with a brief overview of the governance structure of our commission, or 7-member board, all of which are present here at the meeting today. And our most impactful responsibility in Washington State is tolling and ferry fare setting. We also have other statewide policy responsibilities, such as the Washington Transportation Plan and the VOW survey, which you will hear about later on today. In Washington, there is really 4 parties that are responsible for tolling, and each one has a different role. The Washington State Legislature will authorize which toll facilities to be tolled and provides parameters on which to toll that facility. The Commission will set the toll rates required by statute as well as required by bond covenant. The State Department of Transportation will then construct the facility, operate, and maintain the different toll facilities. And lastly, we have the Office of the State Treasurer, who will be responsible for financing the construction phase as well as working with us on ongoing bond covenants to make sure that we're meeting our financial commitments. We like to remind, although you can't see on this presentation, we like to remind folks in Washington State that we've been tolling since the 30s. And while tolling is relatively new in our technologies and development, it's not new in Washington State. And we've also put together in this chart an adjusted inflation toll rate. And we put that forward because we like to remind folks that comparably, when we look back historically, toll rates at today's nominal value are not compared to the real value. Prior generations, once adjusted for inflation, have paid a much higher toll rate as a proportion of their income. In Washington, we use tolling for primarily four different purposes: to fund a project, to manage congestion, to fund a project and manage congestion, and we use tolling or fare setting and pricing to manage a transportation corridor. Currently, there are 3 toll facilities up and operational. We have two expected to come up and operational over the next couple of years. We have the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, which is a toll project used with fixed-rate tolling to fund the project. We have SR 167, an express toll lane. We have the SR 520 bridge, which we manage congestion and fund the project. The anticipated toll facilities are I-405, which will be another express toll lane to manage congestion, and the SR 99 Alaska Way Viaduct, or the deep bore tunnel replacement project, which you might have heard about. In Washington, we offer 5 methods of payment. The first and primary is our good-to-go pass, or a transponder in the vehicle, and the customer will also set up an account. The pay-by-plate is another option for customers. Rather than have a transponder in their vehicle, they can simply set up an account. We'll take a photo of their license plate and build their account that they have on file with us. We have toll booths on one of our bridges, but not all our facilities. We have the pay-by-mail option, which is a combination of photo tolling. Essentially, we take a picture of your license plate, look it up in the DOL records, and then mail you a bill. Lastly, we offer short-term accounts, which is very similar to a pay-by-mail option, but we refer to it as a customer-initiated payment. So rather than us mailing you the bill, you would set up an account and pay up front. We still take a photo of your license plate, but now we have a short-term account established to bill to. Each one of our payment methods is priced appropriately for it, meaning that all our toll rates are not equal. Each method is meant to cover its costs and incentivize customers to switch to the more cost-effective payment collection method. When we look at Tacoma Narrows Bridge, this was our first project in a long while where we're using tolling to fund the project. The toll revenue is used to pay for debt service, maintenance, preservation of the new bridge itself, as well as cover tolling operational costs. Toll rates on this bridge are fixed. They do not change by time of day or day of week. And the good-to-go rate starts at $4.50, with our toll booth $1 more, so $1 premium for the toll booth as an option, and with our pay-by-mail customers paying $2 more than our good-to-go pass. Again, the toll rates are meant to reflect the cost of those additional flexibilities and services. The SR 520 bridge is currently under construction. We're doing pre-tolling on the old bridge in order to help pay for the new bridge. Toll revenue will contribute $1.2 billion to this project, and currently the project still has an unfunded portion of $1.4 billion, which is on the west end entering Seattle. The toll rate structure on this facility is time of day. So again, this facility, we toll it to fund the project, but also manage congestion. So toll rates will vary by time of day. We do not offer a toll booth as a payment option on this facility. We only offer the electronic payment methods, which is the good-to-go, pay-by-mail, pay-by-plate, and short-term accounts. We like to show the different table here as far as our variable toll rate schedule, and you'll notice again that the pay-by-mail pays a premium for that payment option. Again, we want to encourage customers to switch to the more cost-effective collection method, which is our transponder pass, or our good-to-go program. Tolling on SR 167 is an express toll lane or hot lane pilot project. We use a dynamic toll rate pricing schedule, which recalculates the toll rates every 5 minutes based on traffic flow and congestion. We try to maintain travel speeds at 45 miles per hour. The minimum toll rate starts at 50 cents with a maximum set at $9 for the entire 9-mile stretch. But the average toll payer pays roughly $1 to use our HOT lane or express lanes. We have hit the $9 maximum on occasion, but it has been more of a function of an accident on the facility rather than congestion. Our next toll facility to come online is scheduled for the summer of next year. It's I-405. It's one of our most congested freeways in Washington. And what we've found is that our current HOV policy of 2+ is failing, meaning it is not maintaining travel speeds of 45 miles per hour. As such, we're going to turn it into an express toll lane to help move traffic along as well as make additional improvements in that corridor. Again, on 405, we're going to offer the good to go as well as pay by mail option. So that presents its own challenges as far as technology and equipment on the roadside. Now, I mentioned we do use pricing to manage the transportation corridor. We haven't done that yet with our toll bridges, but our ferry system has a long history of using pricing to manage its transportation corridors. On the right there, you see a picture of all our different ferry routes. We like to think of the ferry system as one big fund, so all routes are subsidizing each other. There's really only one route that pays for itself in this entire ferry system. But the ferry system fares have a fare box recovery rate of 70%. The 30% is provided from gas tax dollars. But again, we use pricing to manage a corridor as we don't want traffic to shift from one ferry to another based on pricing. So our example that we tend to point to is our Bainbridge to Seattle route, which is a short route in the middle there, and our Bremerton to Seattle route, where the price of those two routes is the same, although the Bremerton route is twice the distance. We want to take pricing out of the decision-making for our customers when we're managing that corridor. We do expect or anticipate, as there's been much discussion about tolling another facility across Lake Washington, which is I-90. Currently, it's not being tolled. But as legislators look forward, we anticipate that it might become tolled, and we'll have to then think about managing those two bridges, 520 and I-90, as a transportation corridor. In conclusion, tolling is likely to increase in Washington State, both as a means to fund projects and also to manage our congestion. With that, I can conclude or take any questions.
And would you prefer, Noah, to wait till we've heard from Daryl and Michael and Stephanie, and then all of you took questions? Or would
Yeah,
you,
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Great. Noah, thank you. Unless there's a burning question by anyone. Okay, then why don't we let Noah relax for a few moments, and we'll bring up Daryl Johnson with the Orange County Transportation Authority. Daryl, welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for the invitation to speak. Should say right off the beginning that you make me feel at home. The board of directors I work for has 18 members. I think there's 20 of you up there today, so on a regular basis I look at a large group here. I think Commissioner Dunn earlier indicated a little bit about Orange County, but just to put it in a bit of quick context, we are the 6th most populous county in the nation, the 3rd most populous in California, and we have just about 3.2 million people, technically in 800 square miles, but 400 square miles is the Cleveland National Forest. So really our population is in 400 square miles. So that makes us not only one of the most populous, but one of the most dense entities in the state of California as well. We're a consolidated transportation agency. We run the bus system. We have 1 million passengers a week. We plan, design, fund, and sometimes build parts of the freeway system. We own 42 miles of railroad, and we own a single entity standalone express lane facility, which is what I want to talk about today. So this is a separate line of business for OCTA. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, you've heard this morning a bit about the policy of tolling and pricing. And what I'm going to try to focus in on is the reality of what's occurred in the last 11 years in a publicly owned toll facility and some of the policy issues that we've experienced and some recent changes we've made to those policies as the facility matures. So the 91 express lanes, we really talk about it as a land bridge. We have Orange County to the coast. We have Riverside County to the inland. It's a 10-mile toll facility in the median of State Route 91, or what we call the Riverside Freeway. And it was originally implemented as a P3 project in 1995. And the California folks in the room know how that came about. But it was opened in 1995. It was originally sort of planned as an HOV lane, but through various reasons it became an HOT, or an express lane, in 1995. And to put it in context, the only east-west routes, there's a 2-lane facility about 30 miles to the south, Ortega Highway, State Route 74, and then 65 miles to the south is the next sort of state facility, State Route 78 through the Oceanside area, and to the north about 20 miles is State Route 60. So we tend to call this sort of a land bridge. It's the only way to really link the jobs and the housing between the two locations. And to put that in context, Riverside County, at the time in 2002, before OCTA got involved in 2003, about 1.6 million residents and about 500,000 jobs. And the number of jobs in Orange County were about double of that, and the population was in the neighborhood of 2.3 million. The corridor was very, very constrained. You had about 250,000 average daily trips in the corridor. And the franchise agreement that was granted by the state of California to the private company to build the facility had a non-compete provision, and it was pretty strict. It said basically you could, as a public agency, it didn't matter if it was the Department of Transportation, Orange or Riverside County transportation agencies, build any capacity that was not safety related. And even the definition of safety was pretty tight. So you had extreme population growth throughout the 90s and the 2000s, and you had entities, public agencies, suing each other, thinking about suing each other. So in late 2002, through legislation passed by the state of California, sponsored by Orange and Riverside counties, OCTA was able to buy the facility from the public sector. We financed it with, it was about a $207 million purchase. We financed it with about $130 million of Wall Street issued debt, and we financed the remainder with an internal loan from our commuter rail fund. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what happened in between, but by 2014 now, we have all of our non-compete provisions are gone from the facility since it's been in public ownership. Riverside County's grown to about just under 2.3 million in population and about almost $600,000 non-farm jobs. Orange County in that same period has grown to 3.1 million people, and we have about just under 1.5 million non-farm jobs. So you see this continuing balance or imbalance between housing and population. So really, you have people living in Riverside County and working in Orange County. And there's reasons for that, land value and other things and cost of housing. But it really is what drives this discussion between us. The facility now is moving about 285,000 vehicles a day. And for those in the Bay Area here, just to put that in context, that's more than the Bay Bridge carries every single day between Oakland and San Francisco. So this is a really important facility to us in Southern California. And it carries, now the toll lanes carry about 12% of the traffic in the corridor over the course of a 24-hour period. But what's more important to note is it carries 30% of the traffic in the peak hour. So this, as we move into talking about congestion pricing and throughput, that discussion and difference between overall traffic and peak hour traffic is critical as you think about pricing. We have a congestion management pricing policy that's been in place since 2003. And there's a couple of unique things about it. One, it has been put in place in 2003, July of 2003, and it's never, ever been adjusted by the OCTA Board of Directors. It is set up in a way that really takes the politics out of toll setting and lowering and raising. We do public hearings on our bus system. That's a very difficult issue when you raise bus fares. But this is self-adjusting, and for now nearly 11 years, we haven't felt the need to go back and adjust those tolls. Whenever we talk about this congestion pricing model and this policy, though, the question is always, right, you always raise them, but you never lower them. So over the last 10 years, we've come through sort of the best of times in California and the worst of times through the Great Recession. And during the recession, based upon the policy that was already in place, we lowered tolls 15 separate times based upon volumes. So we have this track record that is a very good public communication that not only do you raise the tolls when traffic congestion goes up and you want to create free flow, we've also lowered the tolls when the economics were such that the traffic was down. So what it does is it's based on traffic demand, and what we target is a throughput of 65 miles per hour, which is about 1,600 to 1,700 vehicles per lane per hour. And I like to say the only thing we sell is reliability. We don't give you a free drink at your seat. There's no leather seat. There's no air conditioning. The only thing we can convince people to buy is a trip of 10 miles guaranteed at 65 miles per hour. So we live and die on our reliability and our performance. And we monitor those volumes on a daily basis by hour of day. So if you were to look at our toll schedule, which I won't put up, if anybody has questions, I have a copy of it. But if you were to look at it, you would see in the eastbound direction and the westbound direction 7 days with 24-hour increments in both directions. all of them have a different toll based upon the sort of lagging indicators of the previous quarter. And we adjust those based upon real-time data that we occur, and then adjust quarterly on a go-forward basis. We do that for two reasons. One is we feel like we need to be able to tell our customers why we're setting the price the way we are. Our customers, in turn, have told us, we survey them every 2 years, that they like reliability. They want to know when they're making their decisions about whether to take the facility or not, they want to know what the price is. They don't want to know what the price is when they get on the roadway and they see a flashing sign. They want to be able to look at that toll schedule and understand that if they leave at 2 o'clock on a Friday to go east, it's going to be $3 less than if they leave at 4 o'clock. And they really value that stability and that knowledge. That comes in time and time again in our customer satisfaction surveys. So we have looked quite extensively at, should we change that to a real-time variable pricing, or should we leave it at a fixed congestion price based upon lagging indicators? And at this point, I think we are planning to stick to it on the lagging indicators. To give you a sense of the tolls, our minimum toll is $1.45, and our maximum toll is currently $9.85. It's been as high as $10.65, but on average, the average toll is around $3.07. So when you look at it over across all of our transactions over the course of a year, the revenue raised, we look at an average transaction in the neighborhood of about $3.65. And again, the objective of keeping that free flow at 65 miles an hour. So a couple things on the excess toll revenue policy. Some of this is unique perhaps to the 91 express lanes, but we have about 12 million annual trips in the facility. And at that toll rate, average toll rate that I talked about just a moment ago, roughly $3.66, that generates $44 million a year in toll revenue. And remember, that policy was set for that 65 mile per hour throughput. So to guarantee that throughput, we adjust the pricing for that throughput. But after we've paid all of our debt service, we've paid all of our expenses, we have our capital reserve fund, all of our operating costs, all of those things are set aside. We have about $15 million a year in net excess toll revenue. And the policy question is, what do you do with that? Some folks would say you should lower the tolls. If we were to lower the tolls to match the revenues and expenses, we believe that we would have congestion at an unacceptable level in the express lanes. So I like to say that we do it for congestion and throughput, congestion relief and throughput, and these excess tolls are a byproduct. Now, it's a very nice byproduct to have $15 million a year to try to figure out what to do with, but what do you do with that? What we've done to date is we paid off our internal loan. So as I mentioned earlier, we borrowed about $75 million from our commuter rail fund. That was paid off about 3 years ago. And so all of the internal debt is paid off. And we have used excess toll revenues to do the environmental planning work, engineering design work, and some capital construction cost to add 18 new free lane miles to the corridor. And we have another 4 miles of free general purpose lanes under construction. So the idea is 22 lane miles of free capacity is being added to the corridor there. So we recently went back to the OCTA Board of Directors and we asked, what are we going to, from a policy standpoint, what should we do with the potential net excess revenue? And we looked at a couple of different things. When we bought the lanes, the legislature included a component that said we had to have an annual plan to the legislature to say what's going on in the 91 corridor. We call it the 91 corridor implementation plan. It's a 30-year look at short-term, mid-term, and long-term projects. How are we going to spend excess toll revenue? Really to ensure that the purpose of buying the lanes was achieved. It's done in conjunction with Riverside County, and it's submitted to the legislature annually. So one is it has to be included in that plan. Second, we want to get investment back into the corridor as quickly as we can. So we want to give priority to projects that are ready to go as quickly as possible. And then finally, since we still owe $117 million on the corridor, on the facility, nothing that we would do would have any negative impact on the financial obligations to the existing lanes. So, oops, I jumped ahead a little bit there. So what we've done on that, make sure I get this right here, is we looked at the trips in the corridor. So currently 80% of the trips in the corridor are made on the highway system in total, and 20% are made by transit. That's both express bus and commuter rail. So the OCT board adopted a policy to invest on that same split. So 80% of the excess tolls will go back into the highway corridor, and 20% will go into the transit, and that's both for operations and capital of commuter rail and express bus service. So some examples of things that we just approved earlier this year, the board approved earlier this year, is building of a commuter rail station in the city of Placentia. It's right along the corridor. It's about a $20 million project. It'll be paid for about half with traditional transportation funds and about half with these funds. We're going to be running more express bus service, and we're going to be doing what we call an operational study on the western end of the corridor to look at some of the conflicts with where the lanes end and go into the regular freeway system. We also, the policy says that the board will evaluate that every 2 years and reevaluate that every 2 years. The next thing I want to talk about is the financing. We have taken a policy position at OCTA that public funds, other than that internal loan, will not be used to cross-subsidize, pay for, or subsidize at all any of the activities associated with the toll facility. So that really means toll facilities are paid for by toll revenues. So when we financed the facility 11 years ago, it was a 30-year term, and as we financed it with sort of a high interest rate, we had a variable component, a synthetic fixed component, and that was sort of, I would say, sort of outdated. And as interest rates began to fall over the last 2 years, and we had a 10-year successful history of management of the lanes, we had the opportunity to refinance the facility. We refinanced it and closed the transaction last summer. We resulted in about $25 million of interest cost savings. We did not extend the term, so we have tolling authority through 2065, but the facility will still be paid off in 2030. And we opened an open lien structure. So we basically have a line of credit, if you will, on the facility. We could have had a little bit cheaper interest rate on the financing, but we wanted to have that line of credit against the future toll revenues. So if we have other projects that come along in the corridor, we would have the opportunity to draw on that line of credit going forward. It's very unique in the express lane financing world, and we thought long and hard about what impacts that would have. To date, we have not identified any projects or made any decisions on how we would use that. The facility was rated A- last summer when we did the refinancing. And we just received word from Standard & Poor's 2 Fridays ago. They've upgraded it to AA- and now stands as the single highest-rated toll facility in the U.S. I think the only other one that has equal rating is the Golden Gate Bridge, and that's sort of a unique entity in and of itself. Doesn't have all the things that we have in terms of buses and trains and other things. So we're really happy about that. That allows us to look at borrowing cost on that open lien structure at even at a lower rate. So in wrap-up, these are the 4 goals that we continue to focus on. I thought about opening with this, but I wanted to get some of the other things first. But this is really what we keep coming back to within the county and with the goal of the 91 express lanes, is that we want to optimize the speed and the throughput, because that's really what we're trying to do in the corridor. We're trying to pump as many vehicles through the corridor as we can on any given day. And as we see ourselves reaching the 300,000 average daily vehicle in the 91 corridor in the not-so-distant future, it becomes even more important to manage the capacity that we have. We want to provide travel time savings. The only way people are going to pay us $10 on a Thursday afternoon at 5 o'clock is if they have a guarantee of those travel time savings to get to the other end. And we want to reinvest in the corridor. We want to continue to take the dollars that are a byproduct, as I said, that revenue byproduct, invested in the corridor in a clear and transparent way that the public can understand, the policymakers can understand, and we have no question when people ask, what did you do with the money, we can point right back to it. And we want to provide options. And I think the options are threefold. One is options within the highway corridor, meaning you can choose the express lanes or you can choose the general purpose lanes, but also investing in parallel transit in the corridor, whether it be express bus or commuter rail. We want to provide those options. Those of you from California know that Riverside County is extending the express lanes all the way in about another 10 miles to Interstate 15. We have worked in concert with Riverside County for a number of years on that. We will be sharing our contract operator. We will be sharing our customer service center. We will be sharing back office software. We will be sharing a toll policy. And we've done everything possible to try to do what we can to help streamline that facility. That will be something that when it opens in about 2.5 to 3 years, we think will be even better for the corridor. So in summary, things I wanted to leave you with is we continue to focus on those goals. it encourages high occupancy vehicle travel. There was a discussion earlier about 2+ or 3+. This facility is a 3+ free, with the exception of the eastbound direction peak hours in the afternoon, and then it's half price, so there is a carpool incentive. And then the overall policy does enable us to invest in the operations of the corridor. And then the last one, just because I'm really proud of it, the refinancing saved us $1.5 million a year, and that's really goes right back to the toll payers and the rate payers, and we're proud of that. We had a lot of discussion about what we should do with the savings. Should we give refunds to people? Should we reinvest it in other parts of the corridor? But the whole idea was to put it right back into the facility. So with that, I'll conclude. Thank you.
Darrell Johnson, thank you. If you wouldn't mind rejoining Noah and your colleagues. We're going to hear next from Michael Crayman with the Transportation Corridor Agencies, to be followed by Stephanie Wiggins with LA County MTA. I'm going to remind our speakers, just so that we can get to questions with all of you. I believe we had asked for 10-minute presentations from each, so I'll give you a heads up when there's 2 minutes left, just to try to be helpful there. And thank you again. Michael, you're on.
All right, thank you, and good afternoon, Commissioners. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I appreciate the invite. I represent the Transportation Corridor Agencies, and the mission of our agency is to enhance mobility in Orange County and Southern California by developing and operating publicly owned toll facilities as part of the regional transportation system. We've talked a lot about the growth of population in Orange County. One of the things is most of that growth has occurred over the last 25 years. And we had an underdeveloped transportation infrastructure when we embarked on that large growth. So we kind of did a 1-2 punch in terms of how we were going to attack that. We had a transportation problem, and it really required innovation and creativity. So between toll roads and Measure M, which Darrell's agency runs, we were able to really attack the transportation needs of the county. The first segment of the toll roads opened in 1993. We have more than 250,000 customers per day and generate more than $220 million in annual revenue. Interesting note is that our 51-mile system really represents over 21% or over 20% of the freeway network or the state highway network in Orange County. Along with that type of a roadway program comes huge demands for an environmental program that's compatible with that. And we've made huge investment in that, over 2,000 acres of restored, revegetated, and preserved habitat. We are a public agency providing public infrastructure using private financing. So we're a joint powers authority formed of the 18 cities and 3 county supervisorial districts in Orange County. We received authority to collect tolls in 1987. But we are a state and local partnership. The toll roads are part of the state highway system. TCA's role was to plan, design, finance, and build the roads. The day the roads opened, ownership was transferred to the state of California. Caltrans maintains the roadways, and Highway Patrol patrols the roads for moving violations. We're an agency of innovation and first. We were the first toll road in California in 1993. We developed the Fast Track, which is the interoperable standard throughout the state of California. And because we were a new system and a new concept, in order to finance this initially, we needed a line of credit that came through federal highways and really became and transformed into today's TIFIA program. We run the agency like a business while following the rules.
That will not come out of your time.
While following the rules of a government agency. We have to market our roads because people make a choice to drive these roads. Customer service is very important to us. We have a small professional staff, and we outsource our services to the maximum extent possible. Our goal is to increase ridership to meet our debt service payments. Since the roads were built using virtually no taxpayer dollars, our goal in terms of pricing and financing for these roads is really to generate the toll revenue to pay off our debt service. But the roads do form an important part of the overall network, And they were designed to reduce congestion because they parallel the congested free routes. For example, the 241 parallels the 55 freeway and the 5 freeway, and the 73 parallels the 405 and the 5 freeway, which also then benefits the drivers on those congested routes as they have more space given the roads that the drivers that choose to use the toll roads. There are also regional benefits. In fact, 40% of TCA's fast track holders live outside of Orange County. We benefit the overall infrastructure by providing mobility. We reduce vehicle hours traveled. We also improve health and quality of life. We reduce exhaust emissions from idling cars. We do comply with the sustainable community plans to reduce greenhouse gases, and we integrate transportation and air quality plans. Direct connectors are a big part of the future as we look at where the roads go. So all of our system interchanges have been designed to incorporate at the time HOV connectors, but they can be HOV or connections with managed lanes. We're currently looking at a 91-241 direct connector, and you can see an artist rendering of this down the middle there, where we're able to take the northbound 241 traffic and connect it to the east into the 91 express lanes, or Darrell's system. This creates some unique challenges as we look at different operating models, and we have 3 agencies, both OCTA, RCTC, and TCA, along with Caltrans, in developing this project. If I take a look at the future, though, this really ties into something that the Southern California Associated Governments has looked at in terms of the strategic express lane networks, where there's a system of express lanes throughout the region that incorporates the toll roads as part of those segments in terms of the complete network. And then if I look even further in the future, I would see that while we're looking at putting toll lanes on our freeways, I also see that we put free lanes on our tollways. And then we have a complete network for people to have a choice in terms of how they manage their congestion and make their choices. And it also allows us to maximize the infrastructure that we've invested in. Thank you very much.
Not only was that outstanding, but you can sell, like a toll road, the 3 minutes that you left on the table, if you'd like, to the next speaker.
Cap and trade.
Yeah, we can cap and trade it, absolutely. That's actually 3 minutes and 43 seconds. We'll go for the highest bidder. Yes, you are. Thank you, Michael. That was excellent. Stephanie Wiggins with LA County MTA. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And since I do represent LA, I'll take those 3 minutes and an extra minute. I'm fortunate and thankful for the invitation to present today. Many of you are familiar to me. I have presented before the CTC in the past. So in light of that and the comments already made by my colleagues, I'll quickly speed through some of the background and just highlight some of our lessons learned. My colleagues have talked about the reasons why entities would look at hot lanes. Caltrans and Metro in this instance are no different. In 2008, we received a federal grant. I will point out that the grant that we received that allowed us to implement our pilot program was the same grant opportunity that Washington State availed themselves of with SR 520. With that grant, we had about a $300 million budget, and we elected to take a multimodal approach to implementing hot lanes in LA County for the first time. We converted our existing carpool lanes to high-occupancy toll lanes. So that's different from the situation that Darrell Johnson just spoke about in Orange County. I do want to highlight some pre-deployment challenges. While agencies can talk about the benefits of the program, no one told me when I signed up how difficult it is to implement these things. These, as Jack said earlier, some of my colleagues can get kind of enamored with the technology aspects of the pricing elements, but we have to be sure that we don't overlook the public acceptance elements of this program. And in Los Angeles County in 2008, we were met with serious opposition at all levels, federal, state, and local, over what I would say were key issues. One, concerns that tolls are double taxation. We really, as planners, haven't done a good job of educating the public and naming our roadway infrastructure and explaining how transportation is funded. So it really takes a huge effort to educate the public on where their transportation taxes go. And then, of course, the issue related to Lexus lanes and whether or not tolls are unfair to those with limited incomes, despite actual evidence across the country that low-income commuters actually favor having hot lanes as a choice. It still was very much a paramount concern in Los Angeles County when we introduced the topic in 2008. So education and outreach is an important critical challenge and element that should not be overlooked. We also were implementing our program in 2 corridors that are very congested already. Typically when hot lanes are implemented, particularly when it's a conversion of an existing carpool lane, you have a very underutilized carpool lane, but that wasn't the case in Los Angeles County. And we actually had to come before this commission because we wanted to utilize a different delivery approach and design build, and so that was a critical challenge for us. And again, this commission gave us the authorization in partnership with Caltrans to move forward. One of the key tools to addressing a lot of the opposition that we received early on was that our policymakers elected to make this a pilot. So we would actually move this forward as a demonstration. I think Jack earlier talked about the importance of that. We came up with some key evaluation metrics, to reduce congestion. We're looking at something that's sustainable, not just from an environmental perspective, but financially, and addressing the social equity piece, and of course, public acceptance. Our tolling policy is pretty similar. I will say that, Daryl, we have tolling policy NV in Los Angeles because they do have the gold standard of a tolling policy. But we have a dynamic pricing system. Our toll rates are a minimum of 25 cents per mile, a maximum of $1.40 per mile. So what that means is the highest toll amount for a 14-mile trip on one of our facilities can be over $19, and on the other facility can be over $15. Our average toll is that people are paying is between $4 and $8. We require all vehicles to have a fast track, other than buses and motorcycles and emergency response vehicles. And we have varying HOV requirements. So one of our facilities is a Hot 3, 3 or more people travel toll-free, and the other facility is a Hot 2, 2 or more people travel toll-free. We work closely with California Highway Patrol for enforcement. We give credits if there's a major accident on the freeway that impacts travel. So briefly on the results, we are a pilot. We completed our 12 months of concurrent operation on both facilities in February of this year. The preliminary results show that we are accomplishing many of our goals. For those drivers who chose to change their behavior and move over and pay a toll, they're actually realizing significant travel time savings, anywhere from 13 to 17 minutes in the morning peak and about 8 to 14 minutes in the evening peak. We did this with no major change to the general purpose lane, so that was very important. And also important to us is our concept is that integrating these elements, whether it's tolling with transit, that we're actually going to encourage more people to take a look at transit. And our preliminary results show that we did do that. Over a third of the new riders on our transit system said they were influenced to take transit by virtue of the hot lanes. We also saw a significant increase in our transit ridership. We did upgrade our transit stations along the routes, or along the hot lane routes, and added more buses. But even with that, we saw an increase in transit ridership after the tolling began. From a sustainability perspective, we are able to keep the average travel speeds above 45 miles per hour at least 90% of the time. We generated more than $26 million in net toll revenue between the two facilities, and those funds are being reinvested in transportation corridor improvements within each corridor. And then from a social equity perspective, we did develop a program. We have almost 4,400 LA County households enrolled in that program and have issued about 108,000 toll credits to those target users. From a public acceptance perspective, after our pilot period, we had exceeded our transponder distribution goal. Our goal was 100,000. We were at almost 260,000, Today, we're at over 303,000. Our original projections were that after 5 years, we'd be at 550, so we're well ahead of our original forecast. We also held a public comment period in March and April to get feedback from the public on how they viewed the program, and a majority indicated support for the program. And we've, unlike when we launched the idea of this concept in 2008, this time in 2014, we got letters of support from diverse groups, business, faith-based, community, environmental agencies as well. And we also surveyed carpool lane users and general purpose lane users and asked for their feedback on the program. I will note, just because we're at a state commission, that the interest in our program just isn't in Los Angeles County. Over 95% of our accounts are in Los Angeles County, but the map shows a darker concentration of the heaviest account openings, but all throughout the state we have account openings of interest in our program. And in San Jose, I looked it up this morning, we've got about 200 transponders just in the city of San Jose. Customer feedback. People want, as Daryl said, they want reliability. They primarily use it to get to work. The greatest convenience is time savings. That's really what people want. And despite the tremendous objection that we heard in 2008, the only reason people wanted to allow us to move forward is congestion is so bad, they're looking for an alternative. We also, through, again, our actual statistics show that our fast track account customers come from a broad range of income groups. And again, we don't have any representation of Lexus lanes in the Los Angeles County system. Lessons learned, just in closing, it's very important with pricing to have political champions. They were critical on our project, both in the elected level and in the business community. It's very important to address the equity issues early on in the planning process. The only way we were able to overcome the tremendous opposition in the beginning is through an integrated, informed planning process where we actually modified our program through the environmental phase to address concerns. And I've talked about outreach. Post-launch, you have to really listen to your customers. Market research is key. And work closely with Caltrans and the California Highway Patrol on enforcement improvements. Future opportunities, we have a bill in the legislature right now that would remove our sunset period for our pilot program. Our tolling authority currently expires January 2015. So this bill would actually remove that sunset date and allow us to move forward. And our board just last month approved expanding the program on a couple of other facilities. How'd I make it? 3 minutes?
Drum roll, please. 4 seconds to spare.
Okay.
So quickly, tell us your life story. Stephanie, that was outstanding. I want to thank Noah, Daryl, Michael, and Stephanie for providing such insightful and informative presentations. I'm sure there are questions from both delegations, so I'm going to go with lights that are on to indicate that people would like to speak. Vice Chair Dunn and Commissioner Inman and Commissioner O'Neill. I see those 3 mics.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you. Great presentations by everyone. I really appreciate the information. I particularly want to commend Stephanie. Your lessons learned slide should be a Bible to be read. Watching how astutely and professionally you manage the I-110 and the 10 express lanes was remarkable. And I know because I was part of the business community that worked with LA Metro on that one. So really fabulous work there. I want to share that I think Orange County is sort of ground zero right now for tolling and tolling policy and express lanes development. And it's an interesting dynamic listening to both Daryl Johnson and Mike Cramen talk, because I think folks probably don't realize we have 2 transportation agencies in one county with tolling issues that they have to deal with, and we may possibly now have a 3rd coming in to deal with these things. So my question first is, it's interesting to talk about the technology used in reviewing or tolling folks. LA has been our 900-pound gorilla, and yet some of us in Orange County think the technology that we got stuck with might have been 10 years old. And yet I know, Mike, you were looking at new technology for the toll lanes, the toll roads, that we kind of had to go to 3-button transponders versus going with tags, which we were looking at. So my question is, maybe talk a little bit about the technology aspect and the issues that you had to face. And then secondly, are all three of you as a region looking at tolling policies so that you can coordinate a little bit better on how we might move to the next generation of technology that might make it more efficient and less costly than using 3-button transponders that some of us have and some of us don't have? Anyway, Mike, do you want to?
Well, I have to say I was envious when I was looking at Noah's slides and I saw the sticker on there, which is where we were headed. So that would have given us the ability to, at about 75 cents a car, set them up on Fast Track. Transponders run anywhere from $16 to $18. So it is more expensive technology, but we recognize in the region that, as you mentioned, that LA is the 900-pound gorilla. So we adapted and moved forward to that. I think we weren't faced with a tolling policy that required us to have the ability to discount for HOV 2 or 3. So that's a big difference, and I think that's important that we remember that because it's important to have that element, particularly in a managed lane situation. As we look at the 91-241 connector, we have two agencies coming together with different tolling policies. So this comes into play as well. On that connector, how do we price that connector? Daryl's got HOV pricing policies there. Our CTC also has their policies. We also have huge operational challenges in terms of no tolling agency wants an impact to their revenue stream by whatever you do to change that. So it's important that we work very closely with OCTA and RCTC in the toll operations between those two so that we don't do something that impacts the 65-mile-an-hour experience that Daryl's selling to his customers and also RCTC. So some of the challenges there are, so if you use this connector, the operational sort of pinch point in the system is people that are in the 91 express lanes that want to get out for a more local trip to Corona or the 71 versus staying on all the way to the I-15. So we're looking at there that the policy needs to be that once you get onto this connector, you're committed all the way to the 15, so we don't have people just jumping the queue and then clogging up the people trying to get in and out of the system basically at the county line. So I think those are the challenges. We also have a pricing policy or a toll policy where we set our toll rates every year. We would love to get to the point where we're in more of a congestion pricing situation, and we're getting there in our peak hours. So this year, for the first time, we went to a peak hour rate in addition to a peak period rate. But we have a very diurnal system. It's primarily a commuter route. So learning from what Stephanie's doing, learning from what Daryl's doing helps us really see the future of our pricing policies and operation policies as well.
I would go back to, I can't remember if it was Jim or Jack that said this morning, you have to let your business policy drive your tolling decision. And I think as we look at the history of road pricing and tolling in California, we haven't let that occur. We've created the system that I talked about, the system that Mike talked about, and the system that Stephanie talked about, all for different reasons. And so with that, we've set up different financing mechanisms. We've set up different tolling mechanisms because they're all trying to do different things. Stephanie is blessed with a great federal grant. There's other issues with it, but her concerns about paying back someone on Wall Street are different than Mike's and much different than mine. And I think that is across the state, you have those set of issues. I mentioned in my remarks that the OCTA board said, from a policy perspective, public funds shall not be used to develop, pay for operations of a toll facility. We're the only one in the state of California that does that. So that means we finance things differently. We couldn't even consider a 2+ toll policy, which is a completely different issue than what Stephanie's dealing with. So I should also say that I just spent 6 days in Seattle. I got back last night, and I too have envious of the little sticker. So as I rode around with my brother in both of his cars, that's cheap, it works, and the cost of those types of things are expensive. I would hope, though, as we think about the next generation, that we're not having hockey pucks stuck to our windshield a decade from now as we look at the next round of toll facilities. So I think, I know Malcolm had to step out, but I'll look at Brian. That toll policy you guys are working on is really, really important to start setting that stage for all of us at the regional level and the county level in California to understand how they all integrate and work together, that toll policy setting and how they're managed, financed, and funded.
That's really important, Darrell, and it's interesting, your current board policy notwithstanding, the issue, I think, for Southern California is in so many ways ahead of the game on express lanes and toll roads. Are you looking to work together from a corridor standpoint when you see the I-5 being considered for express lanes, but the I-5 then goes into Orange County, into San Diego? Are you all, as regional on-the-ground builders, notwithstanding that SCAG, I get, they do the planning, but as regional builders of these facilities, talking to each other about where are the corridors going to be improving so that we don't have an express lane built in L.A. but then stops at an Orange County border or stops at a Riverside border? Are you all talking to each other?
And before anyone responds, we have 5 minutes left and several commissioners who also have questions or comments. So if this were a game show, this is the lightning round.
All right, lightning round. We have great success in some areas. Riverside County, on the ground, it works great. Everything's there. Struggling a little bit with Mike because of the different toll policies. We're trying to blend them together, and we haven't even started the conversations with L.A. County about what it looks like on a cross-county basis.
2 seconds. Just because we're talking to a state agency, the issue with the hockey pucks, the lesson learned is a legislature should not prescribe technology solutions. And that's our limitation. We didn't want to go with the hockey puck either, but it is in statute, and that's limited our abilities.
And speaking of the legislature, we have 2 key staff people here today, one from Assembly Transportation and one from Senate Office of Research and the Transportation Committee. So if they wouldn't mind standing so we could thank them for making the trip down, Victoria Alvarez and Ted Oberstar, thanks for joining us today. And let's go to Commissioner Inman, and then Commissioner O'Neill, and then the closing comments, all within 5 minutes, will be from Commissioner Arp.
Okay, well, I can't let these hockey comments go without giving a big shout-out for the LA Kings, since my boss is part owner, and let you all know that the Stanley Cup will be at Majestic Realty on September 24th. So if I have any hockey fans... Okay, so you come down on the 24th of September. Anyway, to build on the whole technology question, and Stephanie, appreciate the comments, but I used this to get on Southwest Airlines yesterday and the day before and the day before. So it blows my mind that I've got to fish around for some hockey puck transponder to make sure that it's set on the right thing, and I can't just, at least put my smartphone up there and have it all connected. But what I wanted to talk about was kind of tie the morning discussion together, and we've had lots of discussions about vehicle miles traveled and road user fee, and should we all consider some kind of migration. But yet in our tolling and with our demand pricing, it seems to me like some of those we're having different discussions, and I know on at least some of our toll roads, you can get on here or you can get way upstream and you're still going to pay the same toll when you get to the tolling spots. So I think that we need to make sure that maybe to the extent we can, because we have to communicate, everybody's talked today has talked about we have to educate and communicate, and the more complicated we make all of this, the harder it is for all of us to tell our story. And then just lastly, I think, Daryl, it's ironic for those of us that have been sitting around for a while and remember when the 91 expressway was the poster child of absolutely what not to do to the cycle of life where you're the top of the mountain today. But it's fascinating, too, then with the recent discussion on the 405. So I think we still have a lot of work to do in terms of communication.
And I think those were more observations than questions, unless anyone would like to respond. And we'll go to Commissioner O'Neill. Commissioner O'Neill?
Well, I
Thank
think
you,
Commissioner Dunn, actually, with her questions, addressed some of my concerns. I don't quite understand. You've got two agencies in Orange County that have different expressways, I gather, and then you've got L.A. that has another system, and I'm confused about how. If I'm a driver and I travel from L.A. to San Diego and I go through these expressways, how does it look to me? Do I get three different bills, or what happens?
Well, one of the things that works really well is we have the CTC committee, which is basically the interoperability committee in the state, and we do have an interoperable standard between all of the agencies. So with the hockey puck, you can go on the I-15 in San Diego.
What
you can go on.
What is this hockey puck?
It's transponder.
Yeah, the transponder.
This is a transponder that's
Right, the square thing that you put in your windshield that gets electronically read as you go under a reader. We can use it on all of Stephanie's roads now with the 123, which all of what we put out now have the switch on it. You can come up here to the Bay Area, right on the 237, go on any of the bridges here, all with the same technology. And then we're all of us working on the national committee to see how we do that nationally. I think, like Fran's question is, what does the next generation look like? And I think the cell phone is going to be a big part of that, but we have to work through that together so that it works not only in the state, but across the country. I think the differences we have are more in our pricing policies, whether you have HOV discounts, and we, as Daryl pointed out, we each have different financing models. We paid for all of the roads construction, and so we have probably the heaviest lift, if you will, to get that back. So our tolling is more to generate the revenue to pay the debt as opposed to reduce congestion. We also have a partner in Caltrans who at the time when we developed these roadways was the federal and state funding was struggling to build the infrastructure. So we built the infrastructure. Now they're to the point where they're struggling to have the funding to maintain it. So that's another dialogue that has to go into these facilities as well.
Well, I think you're way ahead of us, of course, in having these expressways that actually work and that generate a lot of funds. But we're struggling with this question, at least I am, and maybe not the rest of the commission, that we have different rates for HOV2, plus 2, HOV plus 3. How do you really police that? I mean, how do you know how much slippage there is in that kind of operation?
And if we can be really quick on this, because we have to move on. No, not to you, but Daryl, if we can make...
Commissioner
really
O'Neill, I think it's a critical question, and as you explore how you're going to finance your facility,
yes,
you're going to hear a lot from the people that finance you about that specific question. As I mentioned earlier, we're the only privately financed entity like us. Mike's a little bit different there. But that's a big part of our rating. That's a big part of our financing. We have a separate contract with the California Highway Patrol. We have an enforcement area. We do special enforcement days. We have 39 cameras along the road that do license plate photography. And just 2 Fridays ago, we had a special enforcement day with the California Highway Patrol that we pay extra for, and they focus on that enforcement. Showing that enforcement to your financing entities is going to be critical. If you're publicly financing it and you're not beholden to someone else, I think your enforcement takes a back seat to operations. Finding that balance is going to be one of the issues that I mentioned about.
How do you see inside those cars, though?
I'm sorry?
How do you see inside those cars?
So in our facility, we have an observation booth at the 5-mile mark in the center of the freeway. We have a 3+ lane, so technically you're supposed to drive through the 3+ lane. And if our observation booth indicates that they don't see 3 people, that will trigger an activity with the enforcement zone as well. The fines are also very steep. California HOV fines are in excess of $350, moving on to $400. So there's a lot of incentive to pay your $5 or $6.
Daryl, thank you. And final word, Commissioner Art.
Just a quick question, Daryl. Even today, there are folks that point to the 91 as a failed P3/toll project. Have you had a chance to do this kind of a briefing to the legislature? Because, I mean, you know what? They could really use a little real facts once in a while.
Did I mention we have legislative staff here?
No, this really irritates me because over and over again we've seen how this facility is used, how it's managed, how you even got a home equity stinking loan out of it. I mean, you've got great. There's nothing about this project that's a failure, and yet it still gets smeared once in a while, and I really, I resent that.
Well,
Jim, your lack of passion is showing.
On a positive note, the smearing has stopped or it's lessened a bit, so that's a good thing. We have had an opportunity to brief a number of members of the legislature on the particular project. We'd be happy to do more of that. This is sort of a thumbnail sketch. We have a very, very detailed presentation that we've offered a number of times. It's what we would use with our Wall Street folks for our rating agencies, and the CTIPS working group, I can never remember the acronym of that, maybe Ryan can help me out, but it's the Tolling and Pricing Working Group in California. We've invited them to come down and have an opportunity to look at that as well. But if the Commission would like us to do more in detail about the financing, the operation, the enforcement, we'd be pleased to do that at a moment's notice.
Colleagues, would you join me in thanking Noah, Daryl, Michael, and Stephanie? That was outstanding. We hope you can stay. If you have flights, we understand as well. We didn't think, though, that a hearing of the Joint Commissions held in Silicon Valley would be appropriate without also talking about innovations in transportation. I had reached out to Google to talk to us today about some of the amazing work and technologies that they are championing, and our staff had also reached out to a couple of folks for similar presentations. So I want to thank Sarah Hunter with Google. It's a delight to have you here, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Well, thank you, and thank you so much for inviting us. It's a great privilege to have a chance to talk to so many of you at one go, so thank you, Chairman Godino. I just thought I'd talk you through the history of our project. It's interesting that so much of what I've heard today is about what people are already doing. Actually, our stuff is sort of the future, but it starts quite far back in the past. This is an image of RAN.
Where there's actually autonomous highways in that model down there that they were talking about for the future. And actually, in the 50s, people were also talking about dominoes, exactly. That's what you do with your spare time if you don't have to drive. So I think it's worth remembering that, we're not the first people to talk about this project. But I think it's interesting just to go through why this has captured so many people's imagination over the years. Firstly, it's about safety for us. 1.2 million people die on the roads every year. And actually in the US that's the equivalent of one of these falling out of the sky every weekday. So this is a huge number of people dying, and we think this technology could go a long way to helping make a dent in that. It's also, I'm afraid, the largest cause of death for people aged 5 to 34 in the US. So this is not something that we should be sitting by and ignoring, particularly when you imagine that 93% of those crashes are down to human error. If you remove the human from the driving, I think a lot of these crashes would be removed as well. But it's also for us about mobility. So this gentleman here, Steve Mahn, is blind, and he was the first person we gave, outside of Google, we gave a ride to in our very first self-driving car a few years ago. And actually, what he did with his journey was go to take his dry cleaning and to get a taco. So it's really palpable how what people want to do is just live their lives. They don't want to do anything very dramatic other than that. But for people for whom mobility is a problem, they can't do that alone at the moment.
And finally, traffic. I guess I don't need to say this to this group, but 30% of traffic in downtown areas is people circling for parking. So again, I think we can make our cities a lot better if we remove the need to park. Particularly as you imagine people might want to do other stuff with their free time. There is lots of evidence to suggest that actually in the cars people don't want to be driving, they want to be texting, they want to be talking to their friends, they want to be playing trumpets. So we think there's lots of reasons why this project could make a big difference to people's lives. So the history, this is an image of the DARPA challenge. In the early 2000s, DARPA ran 3 different challenges. This first one in the Mojave Desert, where the car that won crashed after 7 miles. They ran a second challenge a year later where they actually completed the course, and then finally an urban challenge. And as a result of this investment by DARPA, there were many universities, CMU, MIT, who had some very highly trained roboticists who were very excited about the project, but DARPA, their funding ran out and they didn't want to carry on. So we stepped in. Larry, our chief executive, got very excited about the prospect of self-driving cars and wanted to know, actually, is this something that was essentially a computer science problem that Google could have a hand in helping to solve? So he asked the team to say, is it really possible? Prove to me that we can actually make this project work. So the team went out and drove 100,000 miles. But they didn't just drive 100,000 miles around a track. They decided to drive really difficult routes as well. So for the Californians amongst you, you'll recognize these routes. They went up and down El Camino to San Francisco from Mountain View, not the route you would choose, but actually the more difficult route over many, many traffic lights. They drove round Lake Tahoe. They did routes that, from the Google perspective, really proved that this technology was workable. So we started with a Prius, which we changed after purchase, and then we moved on to a Lexus. And here you can see this is the car that we're currently using, and these are all the sensors that are on the vehicle. You've got the laser at the top. If you've ever seen the cars, the laser spins very, very fast, and that's collecting a 360-degree view of the world around it. There are cameras to be able to see what color the traffic lights are. There is radar to see other vehicles, and then there's other sensors in the vehicle to position it accurately so you don't rely upon GPS. Here is what the cars see in self-driving mode on a freeway. The big green box in the middle is our vehicle, and the other boxes around it are other vehicles. You can also see the speed limit of the road on the top right, and the bottom left, that's what the camera image sees. That's what the driver would see. What you can see from this image is that the freeway is actually a relatively easy environment to drive in. It may be going fast, but actually it's relatively simple. There's not very much the car will see. But we decided to move on to city streets. We decided that actually freeway driving was great, but for people who depended upon the self-driving car for all of their mobility, it wasn't good enough just to press a button when you got on the freeway. They had to be able to get from their door all the way to their destination. But this isn't so easy. City streets are much more complicated. This is what the car sees now on a city street. The purple boxes are cars, the red boxes are cyclists, and the yellow boxes are pedestrians. You can see the white arrows here. These are the vehicles coming up to the intersection. Here we go, here are the cyclists. And you can also see the cyclists coming up behind our vehicle, so the car can pick up on a cyclist from behind, not just the one it sees in front. And finally, the pedestrians. The car has been programmed to be very cautious as a driver, so it always heeds to pedestrians even when they're slow. It always makes sure that the cyclist coming from behind is given right of way, even when, as a normal driver, you would probably get very frustrated and speed up. But there's also tons of other objects that actually you don't see on here that the car picks up. Stop signs, has to pick up traffic cones. There's all kinds of things on the street that we have to be able to program the car to recognize and respond to. We've made a lot of progress, but we realized that actually to be able to make a fully self-driving car, we would have to make our own vehicle. So we have. This is our prototype of a prototype. This is not the final prototype vehicle. You'll see there are circles where the lights should be. There will be lights on the final prototype vehicle, but we announced this vehicle a few months back, and we've built it ourselves. You can see what it will eventually look like when we finish the manufacturing, and also where the various technologies are on the vehicle that enable it to see the world around it. In addition to the sensors, so the laser on top, the radar, the cameras, etc., there's also new materials on the hardware of the vehicle to make it extra safe. So the windscreen is made of a special plastic that has much less impact, and there's also a foam bumper on the front that, in the worst case scenario of impact, it would minimize the harm to the person. So, as I said, we've made a lot of progress. This is a prototype vehicle that we're manufacturing a few hundred of. We're not going to sell them. It really is a vehicle for us to learn on. But we hope the California regulations are, as many of you may well know, currently being written, and it really does depend upon those being written in a way that enables our vehicle to operate. But we hope to be able to make a fully self-driving car available on the streets of California in the next couple of years. We've actually had a chance to have a few real people ride in it, and I can't show you the video from YouTube here, but I recommend you go to YouTube and see this video, because this is some ordinary neighbours of some of us on the team who we showed the car to, and the excitement and the delight in their faces, I think, tells you how I hope other people will react to it. Thank you very much.
Sarah, that was outstanding. I want to make sure that everyone has their full chance to speak, and you were a great steward with your time. Why don't we take 5 to 7 minutes with Sarah, because I think autonomous vehicles are such a different presentation than the other presentations we're going to hear. So again, if you want to ask a question, make a comment, please just put on your indicator light. Commissioner Medaffer.
Oh, that is working now. I just want to say thank you for the outstanding presentation. I don't know if it was Forbes or an article just recently I read, and I will share it with my California commissioners, and perhaps we could pass it on to Washington. But it was an incredible chart that showed something, and I'm trying to remember from memory, that 95% of all vehicles would be autonomous in something like 2040, which seems very fast, and it's really having to change the cycle of all the existing vehicles. But good work, and I really do think that autonomous vehicles are the wave of the future to not having to keep paving more lanes. Just being able to have vehicles closer and closer together because of the autonomy just makes such a big difference. So this ultimately is a significant congestion management issue. It's a lane management issue, and one that I think is, I just really applaud Google and any others that are working on it moving forward.
Thank you. No, I think you're right that the turnover of the fleet is the big challenge, but I think all the other car manufacturers are also working on various forms of autonomous vehicles, so hopefully the collective effort will mean that fleet turnover is faster than normal.
Excellent. Thank you, Commissioner Medaffer. Commissioner Assemi?
Thank you, Sarah. Great presentation. When you're looking for manufacturing sites, I want to urge you to look at Central California.
We certainly will.
Plenty of land and a great labor force.
Yeah, we actually do some testing in Central California already, actually. We have a track there, so we already know the area well, but thank you.
Commissioner Assemi, thank you for our first shameless plug today. We appreciate that. Other commissioners?
Yours was a shameless plug, too.
I'm sorry, but your mic has been shut off permanently. Sarah, I want to build on Commissioner Medaffer's point. So much of our congestion is caused by accidents. You mentioned the accidents and deaths that occur in automobiles on a yearly basis. Do you have any numbers on how much more free flow our traffic would be if it was all autonomous vehicles because of the lack of accidents?
Yeah, well, actually, the more interesting fact that I have picked up is that if you had better spacing, so if your cars could communicate with each other and minimize the amount of space between them, you could double the through flow on our streets at the moment. Now, that may seem implausible when you look at the 101, for example, but actually our streets, our highways are not being fully utilized. And if the cars can talk to each other, they can be better utilized. I have seen some statistics around the amount of congestion that's generated from people slowing to look at accidents as well. But I haven't got anything authoritative on that, I'm afraid.
Sarah, my last question, you had mentioned the ongoing work, both regulatory and legislatively. If you could share that with the Commission and Commission staff so that this isn't just a one-time really interesting presentation, but for us to better understand what the climate needs to be like legislatively and regulatorily for this to proceed.
Yes. I mean, California had a piece of legislation passed a few years ago that mandated the DMV to then pass some regulations. And they've passed some testing regulations, which are very sensible and very, I think they reflect well the current testing requirements of a lot of the manufacturers. They're currently writing some operating regulations. And as I said, I think for us, it's really important that those come into pass quickly and effectively, because actually the technology can't come to market unless those regulations are done in that way. So I hope they'll get that. I mean, I'm very confident they will. The DMV's been doing some really good work on this, and I'd recommend those of you who work with your own DMVs to sort of look at the California work, because I think they've been doing stuff that no one has ever done before. How do you ascertain that a self-driving car is safe? Those kind of questions have never been answered by anyone. So California has done a good job, and I hope they continue to do so.
Sarah, again, that was outstanding. Feel free to join our other panelists. There may be more questions. With that, why don't we move to Rima Griffith with the Washington State Transportation Commission, and Bill Young with the Research Assurance are going to talk about online survey programs.
I'd like to stay here because I'm just going to do a couple slides, and then I'll let our project manager take the helm at the podium.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rima.
Actually, I was figuring I'd just be throwing my voice that way.
So the Transportation Commission is one of its charges in statute is to do public outreach and education on transportation. And one of the challenges with that is getting people to engage and turn out and come to meetings, which is, I think, a dying art. And so, obviously social media is important, but even then we're restricted to sound bites and limited ways of expressing ourselves, and getting into very complex issues, that can be a challenge. So back in 2007, the Commission worked with the legislature, and we identified a way to start gathering statistically valid data from ferry riders. Because the ferry system presents a challenge for us always, whether it's operations or fares or how we serve these isolated communities. And so it's always very difficult every time the Commission would go to raise the fares on the ferry system, and we'd have these public meetings as stewards and wanting to get people's input, and we'd have 5 people show up. And it cost a lot of money to go and hold these meetings around the communities. So we decided that it was time to start trying to harness the voice of what we call the silent majority. It's the people out there that are, not really angry, and so they're not going to show up and say something, and they're just kind of okay. They're fine. They may not like paying their fares, or they may not like something, but they're not motivated enough to engage. And so we decided to pursue a surveying approach that evolved from, the first round was on papers, but using paper surveys on the boats, very expensive, and we evolved into an online panel, and we've recruited writers from around the Sound, and Bill will get into the details of the construct of it, but all the surveys are now done online, and we get input from our writers on a pretty regular basis on a variety of things, and so that's presenting us with this opportunity now to hear from thousands and thousands of people on a very cost-effective way, and to provide our legislators and decision makers and the governor with statistically valid data that they can help rely on in terms of trying to inform their decision making as they think about policy changes. So the other panel we created came later. The legislature really embraced this Ferry Riders Opinion Group, or FROG is the acronym. And they decided to fund the Commission to move forward with establishing a similar construct survey panel of Washington State residents called the Voice of Washington State. And that, again, same theory. We have a lot more people involved. There's no incentives given to any of these people to join these panels. But we survey them at least once a year with pretty lengthy surveys on transportation matters, whether it's funding or taxing policy or other specific issues around modes or how they move. And people take a moment either on their smartphone or at home on their computers, and they take these surveys as a way to voice their opinions and their preferences and their views on transportation topics. So it's allowing us to get around some of the challenges of more traditional approaches to surveying, like telephone surveying, because the landline is also becoming a dinosaur in a lot of ways. And so it's very difficult to utilize that mechanism in a reliable manner and to get the sample we need to be reliable. Because people, at least in Washington, are so interested in participating, we don't do any incentives. We don't offer people really anything to take these other than the chance to be heard. And then we push back to them the results of these surveys in report form electronically, of course. And it also goes to the legislature and governor every year. And there has been some legislation passed in response to some of the data because they find it reassuring that the public, you know, the majority of the public at least is feeling a certain way, and so there's some comfort in that decision making. We can also drill into the data by county, and where we have adequate sample, we can actually go in by legislative district. So when we meet with legislators, if we have a good sample, we can actually give them data on what their constituents are saying about a certain topic. So it's really utilizing technology in a way that is helping decision making, and it's connecting government and the public in the process of lawmaking. And so with that, I'll let Bill move forward and give you a little bit more information on each panel.
So now I get to repeat everything that she said.
In more detail.
In more detail. And stay within the 10 minutes. Basically, the Voice of Washington State and the FROG are tools that the Commission can use to understand the public. The nice thing about this tool is that once you have recruited the people and they become part of the panel, there are a number of things you don't have to do, like ask them their age, ask them where they live, and the demographic side. So you shorten the surveys that are done. You can also look over time and see how their opinions have changed with the different issues. The FROG program was, like Rima said, was one that we started with, but it was because we thought it was the commuters that were driving the system. And what we found out was that they were only a third of the system's driving types of riders. So one of the things that the panel did was knock down the stereotypes of what we thought was the issues. And it gave us the ability to go into depth with people, both on, we recruited them on the boat, and then they became part of the panel, and over time the Commission could ask policy questions, and if they had additionals on that, we could go back to that same sort of person. We've got about 10,000 people who are part of the panel who have actually taken the surveys, but we've got in excess of 20,000 who have signed up to be part of the program. And you can get down to the nitty-gritty on fare elasticity and trying to understand what does an increase in the fares have to do with the demand that's there. As Rima said, one of the things we saw happen with this program was actual legislation passed. And it really wasn't the survey itself that did the work of getting the R's and the D's to decide that this was one that they were going to fight about. They got the report back by their legislative district. So I looked at mine and he looked at his, and they said the same thing. So we're not going to argue. So we actually saw the reporting of the data having an effect of neutralizing sort of the Republican Democrat, I'm going to fight you out to tooth and nail on the thing. So what we found, in fact, we had a number of legislators who've asked us, oh, by the way, could you ask this question? And then we do it, and we come back, and they passed. Actually, the question was on 10-cent increase in every ticket on the ferry. They came back and passed 25 cents on every ticket. The sky didn't fall. The survey said the sky wasn't going to fall, but it helped them understand that they could do something that on the surface might seem a little bit difficult. The other thing we've looked at with the program is to make sure that we're listening to all sides of the aisle, or in this case, all sides of the writers, that we don't just listen to the commuter who might be more the loud voice that shows up at the meeting, but that we understand for the ferries, the recreational writer, the casual writer, and what they feel about it. One of the outcomes of the study was to spin the data back two different ways. Every writer gets one vote. So it's one man, one vote, one woman, one vote kind of thing. The other side was, well, what if that one man or that one woman takes 100 rides? So we spun it back 100 rides, 100 votes. So you could look at the usage of the system as well as the voting block of the system and look at policy there. One of the things we found that was probably not a good thing to find out was that, and you should know this about the public, they will figure things out. They figured out that if you went across the Tacoma Narrows Bridge going east, it's free. And if you take the ferries going west, it's free. So about a quarter of ferry riders had kind of figured this out, that they could make that loop for free. So, you know, he's talking about tolling and the shrinkage there. One of the other things we also found in the study is that it's a pretty hard job to raise or lower. In this case, this is frog people, the ferry riders, and half of them say don't do anything. But the split is those that say that do raise it, and those that say that lower it. So you know, understanding where the constituency is at and how to manage that, both from a commission standpoint in passing it on to the legislature, but understanding how, from a legislative, political setting, how they have to go through in getting the vote done. The voice of Washington was the outcome. The legislature in Washington has used the Ferry Riders Opinion Group and then wanted to move to asking citizens across the state, how do you feel about issues? And they actually threw some pretty tough issues, like, okay, we're a little short on money here. Where would you get it? And gave them options. And some of the things we've done with the program is looked at the uneducated answer, educate them, and then see how their answer changes so that one can look at what does communications do in terms of changing the perception out there. A third of the members of the Voice of Washington have done a survey, and it's not the same third doing it every time. We try to do one major study a year, so over a 2-year period is when you start to see the whole panel get used. When we recruit, people have to have a reason to do a survey. And, you know, when the phone rings and it's dinner time and can I ask you a few questions, it's like, no, I'm not going to, do the telephone survey. That's a bias that's created. One of the things that we tried to do was to limit the bias in building this panel. So there are many steps in the process. Sales tax on gasoline pretty much covers the full spectrum out there in terms of the types of individuals. Tolling on mountains was another quick poll that we use. People who are interested in communicating to their government become part of the panel. Also, and obviously, people who are interested in the transportation sort of issues. So it's sort of a blend. There, the kinds of questions we ask do reduce the bias that's out there, but it gives them, and this is actually what the website looks like for the Voice of Washington if they were just to come and sign up. We also ask people to use social media, so we ask them to recruit a friend through the program. So it's not just us going out and finding them, but it's them finding them. And we've asked, like I say, some pretty tough questions. Here's billions of dollars. Here's percentages. How would you allocate them? Again, it allows the legislative bodies to kind of understand where the consumers' head is at in the state. And kind of dealing with the road usage charge, it was part of a set of questions we asked. It's easy for people to say, charge the other guy. And in the case of vehicle emission fees, my car doesn't pollute, so therefore it's somebody else that pays. That's where you should get the money. So you can start to see where people's heads are at. You still wind up with almost 40% of the folk out there saying that a mileage type of charge may be a better way of doing things. That doesn't say that you could pass it, but it does say where they're at today. Definitely in the state of Washington, do not put it on property tax. The last tool that we've developed, and it's actually in its infancy state, surveys are great, they're numbers, but they're not discussions. That's where the focus groups come in that have been mentioned today. We're going to try a online focus group, basically, where people can go and discuss issues, such as studded snow tires in Spokane, and whether, who should pay for the road deterioration of studded tires. So you can start to have a conversation with people, and part of the way we divided up the state was kind of in regions that have same thoughts or that would have the same issues kind of arising there. And the outcome would be, in the discussion, the ability for people to converse and vote and allow the commission to have an input into it that's greater than what most public meetings would have. So with that and Rima's comments, we'll see if I got under that 10-minute mark.
Nice try.
Nice try.
But a very good presentation. Thank you very much. If you wouldn't mind, Bill, rejoining Rima, we want to hear from both Rick and Ted with INRIX, and then we'll again open it up for questions from both commissions.
All right, well, thank you for the opportunity to speak. Ted and I will do this jointly. I'll take the first part. Ted will take the second part. Thanks again for the opportunity. INRIX was formed as a venture capital-backed company that was formed in 2005 by a couple ex-Microsoft executives. We're headquartered in Kirkland, Washington, on the east side of the Seattle area. That's actually a couple of years before the first iPhone, if you remember these things, life before the iPhone. At the time we got started, essentially, the goal, Ted and I have both been involved in transportation for 20-plus years, and it's amazing what we don't know about the conditions of the system, particularly in real time, and what we didn't know, we're able to know about now. When INRIX was started in 2005, although the founders didn't necessarily know it at the time, in all cases, that really we're positioned at many of these an intersection of these powerful trends, some of which are technological trends headed in the right direction. We're all getting connected. We're all getting location aware. Some of them are opportunities or challenges, if you will, climate change, urbanization, traffic congestion, and so forth. And fundamentally at the core, INRIX is, we start with, the foundation of our business is we've been able to take anonymous GPS data, combine it together in real time, and create a picture of real-time traffic conditions. Now, it's a lot more complicated. There's a lot of things that have been layered on top of that. We're the first folks in America to essentially be able to put a real-time picture across America of what's happening as far as traffic consistently, whether there were road sensors or not, whether you were in a rich state or a forgotten interstate in the middle of nowhere with a rural construction zone, perhaps overnight. Today, we've morphed that. Our principal business model is we license data and services to businesses and government agencies. We have over 250 customers. We do have a free mobile app, INRIX Traffic. You can go download it if you wish. But fundamentally, again, the core is our traffic data platform. We're live in 40 countries. We provide data updated every minute from China to Brazil at the moment. And again, this platform we built, it's kind of like creating the elephant. We first created this elephant, then we realized that not everybody uses the data the same way. If you're a television station, all you care about is, in your region, information that is digestible and viewable. If you're an urban planner or somebody maybe involved in a major corridor study, you want 5 years of very precise data in a 50 square mile radius. If you're somebody driving a vehicle, if you're a BMW operator in Poland, you might care about a route and traffic that fits in your navigation unit and the best route. So we created a whole bunch of applications on top of that, and at the same time have been focusing, we're leading the market in connected car services. This isn't all the stuff you see with research. This is real impact, two-way communication of the vehicle to help drivers with all kinds of this dynamic perishable information, parking locations, fuel services, charging stations. Ted will talk a little more about that. Again, as we pivot and we look forward, and we started before there was the iPhone, and now we're moving into this world where everything is connected. And it just kind of, essentially, the opportunities of what we can do, we're at the early stages, really, of this understanding, not just the highways and congestion, but movement, and how people move and how we can help them move better and more efficiently. This is an image just to give you a sense of again, how things are evolving and growing. This is an image of GPS data points, 15-minute image. So this is a sum total of 15 minutes of data. They're little red dots. I know they look like lines and blobs, but these are actually little red dots that aggregate over a 15-minute period. And if we fast forward 4 years hence, that was spring of 2010. This is spring of 2014. And you can see the growth, and that just continues. It's kind of like Moore's Law of data. We just get more and more data. And I'm going to pivot back. If you actually look, if you know where the Bakken Shale is in western North Dakota, look at the difference of activity. That's all popped up, both the combination of the growth of activity and the connectivity of the people and the vehicles and devices involved in that growth. Yes, sir. And by the way, we can only paint the 405 or the 101 red, right? We can't make it any redder. There's more data, trust me. So as we pivot to uses and applications today, as far as what we're doing with the government, I joined INRIX a year into its founding, 2006, to essentially establish the government business. The founders knew that there was opportunities to help government, a win-win for all of us, but didn't know exactly what. What we've evolved on is essentially a today, as we look today, and Ted will talk more about as we look forward, but as we exist today, we have services around real-time traffic, just communicating different ways, whether it's segment-level data, images, travel times, historical data, taking that real-time data and bringing it together. Again, we did some of the first things in the world, really, that can create a consistent picture of conditions, whether it's a state, a metropolitan area, a country, a continent. We did the first definitive segment by segment report on traffic congestion in Europe, for instance, all based and predicated on this data. And then analytics, that's a set of tools that sits on top of both the real-time and historical traffic data that allows our customers, including MTC in the Bay Area and Sandag in San Diego, to gain access, analyze, and utilize this data in the cloud without having to invest in any equipment. Some of the customers, our largest client in the government business is an organization called the I-95 Corridor Coalition. It's the entities, it's the agencies up and down the East Coast from Maine to Florida. We've been involved in the project for over 6 years, where essentially the agencies, and several of them use us as their primary source of real-time data. You can see there from South Carolina, and you can see Rhode Island is another one. Every road we have, they license data from us on a minute-by-minute basis to manage their system. Some other agencies have adopted a little different approach where they use us to fill in and so forth. But again, that's the model. The agencies use us as they can benefit. This is an image from the statewide operations center in New Jersey. The right-hand picture up on the wall there is actually an INRIX map. That's our data. So again, the agencies essentially are licensing data from us to get a complete, consistent picture, regardless of who owns the road and whether or not they have infrastructure, working infrastructure on that roadway. And they've used that road about the bridge, the Pulaski Skyway. It's been because they had to. Data can only help you so much. In England, we actually integrate data for the Highways Agency. We take their sensor data, what's called floating vehicle data in Europe. We all have different terms. Bring it together to create a complete picture on the entire English, what's called the strategic road network. And it's utilized across several outlets, including a Traffic England website. This is an interesting application that just popped up in the last, essentially since this summer, the beginning of summer. Purdue has used our data. We've rolled out some very granular data where it's hard to see on this map, but let me kind of explain. And you think about the power of this as entities that deal with statewide, statewide jurisdictions. The entire interstate system in Indiana, every minute, we provide them data. They analyze at 250-meter granularity on the interstates and look for a change in speed. Okay, essentially back of queue detection, Purdue is calling it. They're doing that for several reasons, but a principal reason they're doing that is for work zones. They're looking for the queue of where the work zone in a real-time situation where that work zone queue starts, which is usually upstream of the actual typical rural work zone, 2 lanes moving down to 1. And they actually have this data in police cars on iPads, they position the police car 1 mile upstream of where we say the queue is. And they've started doing this summer. Anecdotal evidence suggests that they've already seen a drop in accidents. And those are bad accidents, significant accidents when you drive into the back of a queue on an interstate. So again, this is the kind of thing that this crowdsourced data can enable. There's a couple of links in your files. You'll have the link for the site that operates in real time is on the top, and a YouTube video which shows an actual illustration of the queue. That's what this picture is with the cameras on the side, is a link at the bottom. Very cool stuff. If you look at analysis, this data is enabling, again, statewide analysis, not just where infrastructure exists, road sensors and so forth. Here's some examples. In Indiana, again, in Maryland. In Texas, there's actually a legislative mandate that every year Texas Department of Transportation has to identify the 100 most congested corridors in Texas. And there's a website you can actually search, Texas Most Congested 100 Corridors, and up will come this site. They leverage our data to create the locations, and then they essentially have created improvement plans around every one of those 100. It's an ongoing activity. Again, you couldn't do this if you could only monitor with the traditional types of data collection that have been available before. You wouldn't know where your 100 worst were. You can only know where your 100 worst were where you had data. A couple things to close, and I'll hand over to Ted. In Washington State, if you ever go up I-90 and the Snoqualmie Pass, there's a sign. There's at least one sign. Is there more than one sign? Or more than one sign. When they put that little number, it says how many minutes it's going to take. That's actually our data that WashDOT provides. There's no sensors involved. That's all coming from us. And if you happen to live around here and you're a frequent user of 511.org, MTC uses our data for anything traffic related in this now is INRIC's data, where we combine the best of all the kind of traditional data plus our data, and MTC licenses that and uses that. So I'll pivot to Ted. To a quick look forward. What's next?
So in the preview of coming attractions, and I know our time is probably getting very tight, so I'm going to move fairly quickly. I'm going to talk about where we're really going in the next year to 18 months. And we've got some real exciting things coming, and I have just a kind of a slide to click through each one. So the first one is intermodal routing, right? And so Rick had mentioned the partnership and the customer that is BMW. So BMW actually licenses our data now in 17 countries. And one of the things that they are interested in rolling out is true multimodal routing. And so in their electric vehicle, the i3 and the i8 that they're launching very shortly, the car will actually tell you when your best option to get to where you're going is to get out of the car. If there's a park and ride lot with space available and the better trip into downtown is for you to park that car and get on the train or the bus, and that's your best way to complete that journey, your car will actually tell you that proactively. And so this is something we're powering from BMW, along with the electric vehicle routing and the charging station location, so all fully integrated into a very connected vehicle. So INRIC's Drive Times is, again, an application we developed that is just now starting to be harnessed by the public sector in some really creative ways. You can see it in the commercial space. If you go to the RE/MAX website or the Windermere Real Estate website, there's now a parameter in there where you fill out the criteria and say, show me all the houses that have 3 bedrooms and 2 baths, right, and this many square feet. You now can also say, this is where our daycare is, this is where I work, and this is where my wife's work, and show me houses that are within 15 minutes drive of each of those locations, and you get to specify the time you would like to be at each one of those locations, and we'll draw that polygon on the map. So what about the public sector? How does this relate to them? So more and more you talk about mobility as accessibility, right? How many jobs are within a certain travel shed, right? So the same type of information can be used for mobility measurements, accessibility metrics, right? So much of the data, and Rick talked about the analytics, is available now on all of the sites. And so what's coming up is push button reports and dashboards, right? So ways to really be able to see the data very, very quickly in a real-time way to answer all kinds of individual questions and meet all the requirements of the new federal guidelines for reporting that are coming up without really having to go out and install any new infrastructure whatsoever. So the I-95 Corridor Coalition that Rick mentioned really started off as a freeway management coalition, and now they've moved out onto arterials. And so one of the exciting things that folks have been doing, and where I really see a lot of the growth in the next year to 18 months, is using the data for arterial performance assessment. And so there's several traditional performance measures on arterials that are built into the analytics that we can apply today. But there's also more fine-grained metrics that folks are working up. So the graphs on the upper right part of the chart are, again, developed by Purdue University for Indiana, but they've also applied them in the state of Utah and several other places to show the benefit of things like traffic signal retiming projects. So any type of an improvement that shows up on an arterial system where the signals are really the impediment and what's causing the delay there, now there's metrics that we can bring into play on that arterial side. This is also being enabled by 2 other factors that are changing in the data, and one is much more coverage. All right, so covering more roads. So now we're really down to covering essentially all the roads where there's any significant traffic flow, but also increased granularity, so much more finer grained, short segments of analysis. Where previously our analysis segments were maybe longer than you would want to see on arterials for good analysis, well, now we're down to 250-meter segments, and the future is going to bring that down to even shorter analysis segments, which makes performance assessment on arterials very, very interesting. And I believe this is kind of the final thing we'll talk about here, and the one we get asked about a lot when we complete presentations is, okay, that was all really well and good. What about origin destination information? Can you tell me where people are coming from and going to and those sorts of things? And about how many cars are on the road? Can you give me any insight into how many vehicles, not just the congestion levels, but the vehicles? And the answer is yes to both of those things. And starting off with historical data, we now actually have a view of what the historical traffic volumes are on the roads, and we're updating that. And then looking forward, we're going to start to see some traffic flow or volumes that we'll be able to paint in real time. Of course, we'll start off with being rough estimates and they get more accurate over time. And then again, also the origin destination information, not just zone to zone, but what routes are folks using to get to the zones. And so things like toll road analysis. So when Sandag made the acquisition of the toll road and they lowered the toll rate and there was a shift in traffic, they had the metrics, they had the measures to see that the volumes went up when they lowered the toll, right, and the volumes went down on the free road. That was all interesting. But they wanted to know, well, where did those trips come from, right? Where were the zones of the people that made the shift, and what about the destinations? So we provided some information to actually help them assess that, and there's a study out now that relates to that. So that was very, very quick. I'm trying to respect your time, and we'll be available for questions.
Rick and Ted, Bill and Rima, excellent job. Rick and Ted, if you can rejoin Bill and Rima, we'll see if there are any questions from commissioners. We have about 7 minutes left before our break. Commissioner Assimi.
Just a quick question. Could you go over again how you collect the data?
Okay, so again, the fundamental element, we started with, again, before there was an iPhone, before you had location and connectivity, the principal sources of our data were, say, commercial vehicles, or anything ranging from, box trucks and taxis on one end to long-haul intercity trucks, on the other end, that had GPS-based fleet management systems embedded in their vehicle for other reasons. We were able to get work arrangements with the fleets and their suppliers, essentially to get bulk data anonymously, but bulk data that allowed us, again, to create those red dots, essentially where I'm at, a latitude, longitude, a heading, and a speed. And then we do all the special sauce, figuring out, well, that means you're on 101, going this fast, in this direction, bring all that together to create a picture. And then we just layered on top of that. Now we have mobile devices and applications from partners and our own mobile app, connected vehicles. Again, people that use our services can also, they essentially provide us data at the same time we're providing them a service.
So you have an app that people can actually sign up for, that you will collect data and they will receive data
We
back?
do have an app, yes. It's a free app. That's part of the equation. You can go down and download INRIX Traffic,
Got it. Thank you.
iPhone or Android. That's only one. There's a lot more sources that make that up. Yes.
And I would just mention, while the California commissioner was asking, do you have an app, the Washington State chair of the commission had already downloaded their app.
Of course.
Come on, team.
That's
we got to be
crowdsourcing.
sharper here.
We work in real time.
Really? Okay. Well, other questions from commissioners? Yes, Commissioner O'Neill.
Yeah. Well, I have NREX downloaded on my iPhone too. So I'm communicating with you folks while I'm driving along with this thing. It's
Anonymously, you are telling us
wow.
you're telling us a heading and a speed.
So I've got NREX. Now, all I want is one of these cars that'll drive me around.
Don't we all?
But what happens when a computer crashes in one of these things? Is it all over? What
You're talking to them, not to
well,
us.
yeah, I guess. But you guys are in the computer.
We have lots of computers, so if one crashes, we're okay. But we're not controlling your vehicle. We're just giving you information.
But I assume what you're doing here, if I had a Google car, I could somehow link the two and
Absolutely.
Just
Traffic influence
not worry
routing.
about a bloody thing.
Traffic influence routing is an example. And again, the BMW i3, as Ted talked about, the range. We essentially, that drive time application is a range finder, so you know the traffic conditions, if I have this much charge in the vehicle, based on this many conditions, how far can I get? And then the vehicle itself knows where charging stations are, so there's a thing called range anxiety if you're studying electric vehicles. So together that helps with range anxiety.
Great. I should have mentioned as well that I spoke with Sarah Hunter of Google before she left, and each commissioner will be getting a driverless car. Yes. They're parked downstairs. You can just drive them off on your way.
It's under your chair.
We have several commissioners with their lights on. Commissioner Madaffer, Commissioner Art.
Thank you. I'll be real brief. I too have
Commissioner
downloaded the app. We're looking at it here, so thank you. It's great, and I'm familiar with it being from San Diego. Michael Robertson recently, the guy that founded MP3.com, has opined that, I don't know if it's your technology that's using Bluetooth in cars as monitoring, is somehow or another invading our privacies. People that use Google Maps don't realize that data is constantly going up, giving Google its traffic information. How are you responding to that?
You want to start?
Yeah, I'd love to chat about that. So a couple of ways. So one is all of our data is anonymized at the source, and we can show folks that. And so the few inquiries that we get, we can show folks that the data has been anonymized. But the other part of it is that the media and the transportation professionals are the only ones that really ask those questions. We provide services to millions of clients, and the clients themselves don't ask those questions. I think folks now pretty much understand that when you're using Google, Google's learning something about you, right? And when you're using a traffic application, the provider of that service is learning a little something about you, and people are willing to trade that, right, for the service, right?
Well, I appreciate that. I think everybody should know that, for example, Sandag is being sued right now by Mr. Robertson for that information. They want to know exactly what kind of data the government is getting and how it's being used. So it is an interesting issue that is out there, and I think agencies need to be wary of that. And I think what you guys provide and what you release is an issue to be concerned with.
Oh, excellent. I'm glad that Mr. Litt has lit up his light, but we take them in the order that we saw them and that I announced them. So we'll go to Commissioner Arp, Commissioner Dunn, and then Commissioner Litt.
So I'm thinking if this could be used in a particular kind of application. In my day job, we help a lot of counties get sales tax measures put together to fund local improvements. And one of the issues that comes up sometimes in counties is that you're trying to make improvements in roads where people actually don't live there, but they're traveling through and they're getting a lot of benefit out of it, but they're not necessarily paying the sales tax. And I'm wondering if your data would be able to sift out that kind of usage on a particular corridor. You know, like people going up through Tahoe. I live in Placer County, so a lot of people come through Placer County on the way to Tahoe. You know, sometimes they stop and get an In-N-Out burger, but sometimes they don't do anything except just travel through our roads. And so, well, the state's roads. And anyway, just wondering, just you know, whether your data has that kind of application.
So yes, it does. So, and again, it's one of those things that our services are basically right in front of us. We're just now starting to mine the data to answer some of these questions, right? And so, and how we put that service together is somewhat shaped by the questions that the agencies are asking us to help them answer. Right? And so, like the shift in traffic on the toll corridors, you know, this is a very similar type thing where I have this corridor, and we know there's a lot of traffic on it. You know, where's that traffic kind of coming from, right? Who's the beneficiary of this corridor? Who are the users? How broadly are they? What's the service shed essentially of this corridor? And it's the kind of thing that we can look into the data and see.
Thanks.
I would just add, you know, being mindful again. There is this kind of push and pull of the too precise, you know, understanding where folks come from, not down to the home address, but the general area. And so those are some of the balancing acts you do with this kind of data, right? But yes, that's good. Route analytics is what we're calling it.
Commissioner Dunn and then Commissioner Litt.
It is interesting. Thank you, Carl, Mr. Chairman. It is interesting. Is Beat the Traffic a competitor or a less? No, it's a different kind of program. What's the difference between INRIX and Beat the Traffic?
Depends on the market. That's a whole. That requires. In the technology industry, the answer often is it depends. They've been a customer of ours in some markets. They get their own data and they do their own thing.
Okay.
So it'll depend on the market.
Okay, but a similar kind of thing.
Yeah. So for instance, the part that puts them on, they do a lot of TV stations. The traffic is on a TV, and they may license data from us in places they don't have access to data. Like we don't do the TV station part, but we provide the data part.
So, and you make your you get funding for from the studies that you do for government agencies?
From licensing from agencies, from vehicle manufacturers, from mobile device makers, Beat the Traffic,
right.
So on and so forth. Yeah, agencies and businesses license.
So is it unfair for me to think that the privacy issues that we have heard from our public in tolling and in road user services that we've been all studying today, are those privacy issues sort of neutralized by public that has downloaded your app? Do you see what I'm trying to say? Because we've got issues over here.
Yeah, understood. Yeah.
But we think it's a public misperception sometimes is that if you have a cell phone, you're already over, But I'm trying to be respectful.
No, I think that's right. I think the way Ted answered one of the previous questions is a very good synopsis. That there's a few things. There's if you misuse, we have just like an agency. We also have a bond of trust. If somebody felt we were misusing data, we'd get fired in a heartbeat and be subject. We're very cautious. You have automakers as a client of yours. They don't want to be. Just think about where GM's at, right? In their situations, they don't need to have privacy implications. So we have that concern that we deal with all the time. At the same point, we're not a government agency, and I think the issue, the exchange of benefits for information is something that the public in general is more comfortable doing with third parties than maybe the government. So I think we have not had the same as Ted's point. The media and all of us transportation professionals and elected appointed officials we tend to get that question much more from this side than from the actual people that use our services.
We make a choice. We download your app.
That's right. Download our app, or you're a client that uses a service. That's exactly right.
We're going to hear from Commissioner Litt and then Commissioner Jennings, and then we're going to take a break.
Oh, good. I'll make it quick. This is mostly an observation, but may end in a question, so we'll get there. And it has to deal with the Snoqualmie Pass sign, which I go through frequently, and normally it is extremely accurate. Sunday when I came through it, it said that there would be about a 12-minute delay, typical weekend, and it was more like a 45-minute delay. Who updates? How does that sign that's you say is up to the minute, who updates those kinds of traffic signs with that data?
So there's actually a several-step process behind the scenes in updating the signs, and so we provide the raw data that goes to WashDOT on a link-by-link basis, and then essentially WashDOT has an algorithm, it's automated, that adds that travel time up and then posts it out through their network to the sign. Okay, and so a couple things can happen. It's rare, but once in a while we're wrong. Okay, and so we put ourselves in the we're not perfect column, but constantly getting better, right? So the data is very good, it's not perfect. So there's that element of it, but there's also things that happen, and change can happen very rapidly, right? And it takes a little bit of time for change to work its way through the system. And sometimes it can be essentially something happened after you crossed the sign, right? You saw the sign and the slowdown happened in front of you, or it could be that it just took us time to detect it and get the calculation right on that and relay it in. But anyway, that's kind of the chain on how the data moves and a little bit on, what could happen there.
Yeah, on your phone.
On your phone.
Commissioner Jennings, did you want to weigh in? Okay, great. Anyone else? All right, why don't we go ahead with our planned 15-minute break. We're going to regather at 3:10. Thank you all. Great panel.